The numbers don't lie. As baby boomers retire and birth rates continue to fall, the American workforce is shrinking. Starting this year, 2025, we'll be adding only 20% of the workers we once did, a shift that will ripple through every industry. Now let's have ourselves a pocket-sized pep talk and unpack why the smartest strategy isn't just working hard to find and hire new people, but keeping the great employees you already have. Want to know how you do that? Stick around and find out.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Richard Dick Finnegan, is CEO of C-Suite Analytics and the originator of Stay Interviews. A top global voice on employee retention, his strategies have helped organizations reduce turnover by up to 58% and save millions of dollars across 6 continents. He's a frequent speaker at executives and C-suite leadership conferences, workforce development conferences, industry association annual meetings, and national SHRM conferences. Targeting Turnover is his 6th book and his most direct call to action for frontline accountability. Happy to have you with us and welcome to the show, Dick.
Thank you, Rob. It's terrific to be here. I hope I can match your energy.
I've been around you. You can match my energy. I just need to poke you a little bit, but you're there. So anyway, pleasure to have you. I want to dive right in and start by getting your reaction to something that we've all heard. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. In your experience, how true is that?
Well, it's 100% true. The contrast is the companies think people stay for money, they stay for benefits, they stay for Employee Appreciation Week, they stay for pet insurance. Companies continue to throw things at people that are not about their leader when we know that leaders drive retention. And when I say no, I was schooled by a professor of industrial psychology at mid-career, and he walked me through all the data. And in one of those 6 books you mentioned, I actually footnote and explain 25 different studies that all say the same thing. The number one reason employees stay or leave or disengage or engage is how much they trust their immediate manager. So it doesn't mean, Rob, everybody who leaves didn't trust their boss. It means if you want to solve retention, that's your place to start. That's the one pin to knock down 10 pins.
Got it. Where does recognition fall in all that? I've always heard that recognition was a key contributor to why people left, and not just money, just being recognized for the work they do.
You know, let's peel over to employee engagement surveys. So you do an engagement survey, you get the results. HR is given the results, usually a month later. They presume that data is real for a year, which of course it's not. They presume that data is the magic ticket, but it treats everybody equally when, going back to that professor, the first thing he taught me was top performers outperform average performers by 4 to 1. If you believe that, you'll never do another engagement survey. But let's suppose you do one, and the answer is people want more recognition. So you get a committee, the committee meets 3 times, they come into the whiteboard and they say, we got it. Employee of the month, employee of the year, Employee Appreciation Week, get a backpack at 5 years, get a clock at 10, you survey again a year later, nothing changes. Because employees don't really care about the backpack. They really don't want to watch somebody else win an award. They want their manager to tell them they did something well. And in that consistent group of solutions, in quotes, there's nothing about the manager. Let's suppose that engagement survey said, the number one thing is absence of communication. You get the same employee committee, they do the same 3 meetings on a whiteboard, and they say CEO video, town hall meetings, pump up information on the company internet. Does nothing. Employees want their manager to tell them what's going on. So employees stay or leave, Rob, or mostly leave for 1,000 paper cuts. They leave because they're in their job, they are experiencing all the things they experience. This breaks down, their manager doesn't connect with them, they don't trust their manager, their colleagues are jerks, their colleagues are not held accountable. But the main reason employees quit is all within that sphere of the manager. Gallup says managers are responsible for 70% engagement and retention. But once again, Gallup will do an engagement survey and they will tell you, go have employee of the month.
Wow. That's incredible. And the funny thing is when you said 70%, I actually thought it might be higher. There's so much to deal with that. Okay, you talk about trust. From the sales desk over here, I can tell you that we always say, well, that's the foundation of the building. We can't build urgency. And it all starts with trust. Yay. And yet everyone's seeking a process for trust. Now that we've outed it, how do you do it? So how do you train managers to build trust and retain these employees?
The simple answer, but it's not so simple to do, is stay interviews. And I invented this concept with a book in 2012. And I did it because once I worked with this professor and I saw all the data and I understood the number one reason employees stay, leave, engage, disengage is how much they trust their boss. I felt it incumbent upon me to invent a way those managers could sit one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball, and ask, why do you stay? Why might you leave? What can I do to keep you? What can I do to make things better? And what happened was we would go out to companies and they would say, oh, this is a good idea. Then some of the managers would do it. Some of the managers didn't do it. And what I found the missing piece was, as long as they were not accountable for retention or engagement, it was optional. But then we invented an algorithm, a calculator for how to put a cost on employee turnover. And we began doing the calculator, but we required that finance participate because that's everything. That is everything. You get the CFO to understand the cost of turnover, you're on your way. And I say often when I speak that CFOs come to work each day, they open their screens and they look at the same reports over and over and over, and they're trying to find the quarters in the couch, Rob. When millions of dollars are going out the door around the corner in HR, except HR can't do anything about it. They can just create one-size-fits-all programs. And once you wake up those CFOs, here's one way of thinking about it. If HR says to the CEO, the benchmark for turnover in our industry is 25% and we're at 24, the CEO says, way to go. If you say the benchmark's 25, we're at 24, it costs us $11.6 million, the CEO says, we got to fix it. So there's a tremendous difference when you put a cost on turnover. And what ultimately happens is accountability for retention moves from HR to the operating side of the company, which is where it's always belonged. What got my start was I'm a therapist who became an HR executive for a big banking company. And the CEO called me in and said, turnover's high, go fix it. You're in HR. You know the HR stuff. I'm holding you accountable to fix it. The combination of being told I'm accountable plus what I knew of this CEO made me go home and work on my resume. And that's no exaggeration. But what I knew was, and picture a branch of a bank, we had so many branches all over the place. But if you go to any three of them on the same road or the same neighborhood, one would have 50% turnover, one would have 25% turnover, one would have 10% turnover. And if you went to the executives and said, which managers do you think have the highest turnover and which the lowest? They would all agree to the list. But they still said, HR, go do salary surveys, benefit surveys. So instead of doing any HR thing, Rob, we met with all the managers and we said, we have a great solution to employee turnover. Here's a goal, go make it. And I'll never forget one manager in the back of the room, I knew this man, he'd be the one. He stood up and he said, wait a minute. He said, you're telling me you expect us to cut turnover. You're not going to raise pay. You're not going to increase benefits. You're not going to increase training. And the executive who I'd been working with said, Bob, you're right. He said, in fact, I'm asking you to cut turnover by 10%. That other 90%, you can blame on me. You can blame on pay. And then he increased his volume and he said, or you can blame your dog, but you better get me 10. We went to a bunch of other meetings, but there was no discussion. The word was out.
Right.
And managers would call me and they would say, the pay sucks, the benefits suck, probably you suck. But turnover fell off a cliff, 19% in 90 days. We saved over $4 million. And I knew, kind of big sentence here, everything HR taught me about cutting turnover was wrong.
Okay. All right. Powerful. But I'm going to circle around. This is the corporate trainer in me. All right. I'm always looking for a process. So what you gave me was, in a sense, how we sold the managers. What was in it for the managers to get the managers on board. Now, the trainer in me says, okay, I'm a manager. I said, okay, so I have to build trust. What process is in place? In other words, so what's something repeatable and predictable that I can do now that I'm on board? I got the trust part. How do I do it? I know why to do it now.
So the term stay interviews has been expanded to mean many different things. And somebody on our team went into Chat GPT to say who invented stay interviews. And the answer is me. Okay.
Oh, good.
Right.
Congratulations. It got that one right.
So I'm going to speak with authority here. Okay.
Okay.
Stay interviews only work if they're done by the immediate manager, if that manager has a goal to improve retention or engagement or both, and if they are trained on how to use it, how to do it. So, and a lot of companies would say, here's the opposite. They would say, well, HR is going to go do it. The managers don't have time. That's a waste of time. They're just going to create a list. Or the managers don't have time to be trained. We really don't want to give them a goal or an accountability. We'll just make it voluntary. That's a waste of time. When we train managers, Rob, we train them to ask, there's 5 questions. Don't vary. Ask the 5 questions. You can build up to them, but ask them for beta because they're tested verbatim. Secondly, when you ask it, ask the question and listen. Don't think about the next thing you're going to say. Take it all in. Listen for popcorn trails because they're going to tell you, they're going to drop hints about this piece of my job, this colleague I work with, this assignment over here. They're going to tell you in answer to the 5 questions, hints. Chase those hints. Convert 5 questions to 20 or 25 questions with open-ended and closed-ended probes. Next, take 2 pages of notes. Take notes so they know you're listening. Take notes so you are listening. Take notes, take notes, take notes. When you've gone through the 5 questions, look at your notes and say, what if I did this instead of that? What if I followed up here? Build what we call a stay plan, but it's not fancy. It's 1 or 2 sentences of things I'm going to do. And then once you do that, your conversations with this employee will be different than, hey, how you doing? Happy Tuesday. They'll be full of content about retention and things you already know. So you will know your people so much better, but you will be accountable for a goal. And when I say a goal, what we do with our clients is we say, okay, for this unit, they can lose 3 people a month to make their goal. We are going to track every month. How many did this unit lose? Which manager lost the most? What is their forecast? Because they forecast how long each employee will stay. Simple. Traffic light green means more than a year. Yellow 6, 12 months. Red 0 to 6. We want to know, are your forecasts accurate? Do you know what's going on? So we are tracking, build accountability. We ask our client organizations to name what we call a retention champion who cannot be in HR. They've got to be in operations. They've got to be a high-level operations person. This is a serious assignment for them. They are now accountable for employee retention.
Well, congratulations. You passed the zeroid test. I love the process. And, I actually wrote down the word listen before you started answering your question because I thought if that's not in there, I'm going to have to take Dick on this one.
You'll call me later.
But the funny thing is, you know it, I know it. And yet, from a training standpoint, most people are what we call unconsciously incompetent. In other words, if you asked them before you told them that, they'd say, oh, I'm a great listener. But I love what you said, and I talk to salespeople about this a lot, which is take notes. And I'd ask me, what am I supposed to write? I'd say, well, you're going to write half the things that you need that you're hearing, and the other half whatever looks important to the client, because you don't want to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs when they go, Dick, this is really important. In your mind going, not for me, it isn't. If it's important to the client, it's important to me. Right. And so I love the fact that you've got them taking pages of notes, and some of it is going to be really relevant and some of it's respectful. And I appreciate hearing that. So now I got a sense of process. Now I got a why and I got a how. You opened up the AI door, so I'm coming in. We know that AI has recognized you. Congratulations. I'm immediately thinking, I wonder if it knows Rob Jollis. We'll figure that out soon. But can automation or AI help solve this crisis, or does it make it worse?
Well, for this particular process, I'm confident it would make it worse because this is about building trust one-on-one. So there are other conversations we can have about AI, but this is about eye contact. It's about facial expressions. It's about being real. And maybe I said this earlier, I can't recall, Rob. I'm a therapist by training. I know, for example, that when somebody expresses an emotion in a stay interview, they say, I'm just pissed off at John. He can't get things done. I don't know why you don't fire him. It's completely irritating to me. Every day I go home and wonder why you don't fire him. What are you going to do about it? That the response is not, I'll talk to John. It's recognizing the emotion. It's, you seem really angry about that. And if I had your perspective, I'd be angry. I understand why you're angry. Let me deal with this. So yes, take notes. Yes, probe. Yes, I'm a therapist. You can't escape it, right?
Right, right. Yes, know what an open probe is. I mean, you're saying things that seem basic, but I'm going to backfill and tell you that I'm running around to this day with people taking out their smartphones and recording conversations. I don't hear a whole lot of even questions. And we're talking about somebody trying to persuade another individual, to win the trust of another individual. It may be logical, but it's not instinctive. They're not asking the questions they should.
Right.
And two, when they do, it's more of an interrogation than a conversation because they haven't learned the difference between an open and closed. Or should I say this? They learned it 10 times. They still are not applying
Don't
it.
do it.
Right. They don't do it. And it's as simple as just the first word out of your mouth. What, how, why, tell, describe. We're probably going to go open. Do, is, if, are, can, would, could. We're probably going to go close. I wish we'd be more process oriented. And then let me fire this question at you. Maybe that's one of the issues. I'm, traditionally in this country, we promote people because they sold a widget better or they handled a widget better, whatever. They were very good with that widget. Without a drop of management training, they've now been tabbed to be a manager. So I'm wondering if maybe part of the issue is what percentage of people even get management trained, let alone trained here.
There's a Gallup statistic that only 10% of people who are managers should be managers. Ooh. Now, that sounds extraordinarily low to me.
Yeah.
But certainly some shouldn't be. But I think the next question becomes, how do you train them? And there's all sorts of ways to train them. But what we say to companies is they don't have to have any previous training. They just have to do what we ask them to do. And you will be overwhelmed when your turnover falls in half because people go home and they say, I never had a meeting like that before. And I used to say, I forgot about this. I used to say there's only two kinds of meetings. Did you do your work? And here's more work. But this is a different kind of meeting.
Right.
This is a very different kind of meeting. Speaking of meetings, if you take what comes out of engagement surveys and exit surveys and you flush it, you never look at it again, you'll be fine. And I really believe if you want to know what employees really think, put a microphone under their dinner table. And I realize that's not possible. That's fantasy. I get it. But if you did that thing, you would know exactly what they think. Because when somebody says, how was your day, dear? Nobody says, yeah, my day is okay. I just wish we had pet insurance. Because nobody cares. Nobody cares about so many things that we think they care about. And I was speaking recently in Southern California to the top 25 people of a pharmaceutical firm. These are people, even though houses cost a lot there, these are people who live in big houses. And I said this, that, just what happens at the dinner table. And one man was enraged, no exaggeration. He stood up and he said, first of all, he stood up and he said, I so disagree with you. He said, I tell my workers, work-life balance. You never talk about work at home. And I thought about saying, either, sir, you're brilliant, please sit down. Or I took option two, which is I said, let's find out. We've got the top 25 executives in your company. The CEO, Brian, is back in the corner. I want to ask you all for a moment of honesty. Raise your arm if in the last week you've talked about your boss over dinner. 25 arms went up in the air. And we tell managers, you're on the menu every night. You decide what they say about you, but you're on the menu.
Yeah. Mind if I just make a little training note out of that for anybody who's ever been in a situation? And when somebody stands up and gets a little bit heated, sometimes in the training world, we refer to that as a sniper. Okay. It's a little aggressive. We could have asked that question probably a little bit in a different way, certainly sitting. But whether you did that intentionally or not, one of the best moves you can make is exactly what you did. You don't return fire. You don't say, you're wrong, sir. It's called a relay. And what you did was you said, you know what? I'm not going to go to battle with this person. I'll let the room talk to this person.
Right.
And that's referred to as a relay. And that's a terrific move, not only in that situation, Dick, but for any trainer who's got somebody standing up and is a little bit excited. They typically don't mean to be coming off that way. That's why we don't really need to butt heads with them. But just trying to win the argument in front of the rest of the room is usually not going to work. Relaying and letting the room have at it usually is a much better move. So kudos to you. I can tell you've been in the pit before. All right, let's keep moving. You say that the workforce, when I started, I was looking at some of your notes before we began. You say that the workforce is shrinking with baby boomers retiring and fewer workers entering the pipeline. What do you think most business leaders underestimate most about this particular trend?
They're clueless about it. And when I say clueless, I don't mean that to be critical, Rob. I write a weekly column and I stay on top of data all the time. And I found that about 14, 15 months ago, I found that I kept hearing this concept of baby boomers like me hitting the road, birth rate down. But what's the resulting data? So I reached out to the Census Bureau and I asked, and I had many scheduled phone calls with them. They would bring other people onto the call. They would send me emails. They would send me press releases. I have a file about that thick of printed information from the Census Bureau. And I sat here at the same desk in the evenings and I would get out all these charts and I would try to figure out, what does this really mean? And what I realized was, based on their data, the best analysis would be for ages 18 to 64 in the United States. How many people are there in ages 18 to 64? And what I found was something you said in the intro, and you said it very succinctly, that we're accustomed to that group growing in numbers about 1% a year. But beginning literally in this year, 2025, it will grow 20% of that on average, as far as the Census Bureau can see. And the problem is exactly those two intersections. 30 million baby boomers will walk away. The birth rate skyrocketed right after World War II. When I was a kid, Rob, in St. Cyril Elementary School in Pittsburgh, PA, there were 4 Rileys, 4 Starzinskis. There were all these kids. Every one of my friends had 3 or 4 kids in the same elementary school. That just doesn't happen anymore. And what happened was, if you can picture one number here, that in any society, the birth rate has to be 2.1 to stay even, meaning every woman has to give birth to 2.1 kids. We were at about 3.5, almost 4 coming out of World War II. We began a descent that meant by 1972, we went under the line. We've been under the line. This is over 50 years ago. We've been under that line almost every year since 1972. And the outcome is that we just don't have babies. And there's a sharp turnoff at 2011, where it really goes down. And scientists have said this sounds out of this world, but when you think about it, you'll bite. Scientists have said that's when cell phones became smartphones. And that's when people started looking at their phones, looking at their phones, looking at their phones. And the birth rate went further down, marriages went further down, people who wanted relationships went further down, sex across all generations went down because life, friends, sex, whatever you wanted was right here. And it has really stifled Americans gathering together, but not just as Americans, as I'll tell you in a moment. One great piece of evidence was this study I read in the Atlantic that said last year, 75% of restaurant receipts, Rob, were for takeout or delivery.
Wow.
Now,
I would think the
say,
pandemic had something to do with that. We were almost trained.
I think so.
Yeah.
And you would say, okay, Chinese restaurants, it's always been that way. You might say, well, fast food restaurants. But you go into restaurants and you say to yourself, how do they stay in business? There's nobody here. It's because they're shipping out food.
Yeah.
People, but you look at church attendance, you look at Rotary attendance, you take any traditional gathering group, all those attendance numbers are down. And so when I saw the incredible deficit of talent, I said to myself, how does the United States stay competitive? How do we stay number one? And I learned much more because the Census Bureau data took me to UN data, that took me to World Bank data, and now I had the whole picture. And the whole picture is that every industrialized nation is in the same boat. Our birth rate is 1.6 versus 2.1. South Korea's is 0.7. It's the lowest in the world. Japan has been losing citizens since 2008, and every nation has its story. Germany has a 5-point system to get in as an immigrant, or you're not getting in. Japan has said, we don't want immigrants, they're not going to come here. We want women to go to work, so they have a program called Womenomics. Canada has been the most open nation of all. And if you go to Toronto, you will feel it. It is the most international city. But in one way, it cost Trudeau his job because they've imported so many, I'm going to say Indians, but more than Indians, who got good jobs and built wealth that native-born Canadians in Toronto can't afford a place to live. So there's all sorts of things going on here. In the United States, here's 3 incredible forecasts. By 2030, like a blink of an eye away, 51% of new entries to ages 18 to 64 in the US will be born out of the United States.
Wow.
Now, is that still going to hold true? I don't know, because people don't want to come to the US like they once wanted to, as I was writing the book. Secondly, by 2080, the US population will fall. Is that still true? Maybe it's now sooner if we can't get immigrants to come. And by 2100, and of course, I'm going to be dead for these last 2 numbers, 2080, 2100. But imagine this, because the birth rates are so low in the industrial countries and so high in the poor countries, that by 2100, according to the United Nations, 5 of the 10 most populated nations across the world will be in Africa.
Wow.
And I looked at all this data and I said, who knows this? Who knows this? This should be on every broadcast. This is important information for running a business or building a society. But nobody seemed to know it. So I haven't plugged the book. Here's the new book, by the way.
He's holding up Targeting Turnover, everybody.
Yes.
Keep going.
That is chapter 1 of the book.
Okay.
Is all of this data.
Right. All right. You got a lot of data there.
Right.
But I know CEOs. I've been 33 years meeting with them. If you had 5 minutes with the CEO, and that's a lot. But if you had 5 minutes, what's the one thing that you want them to understand about turnover? Because you're bringing up a lot of data. So give me a hot button if you've got just 5 with a CEO.
I'd say you better change the way you operate your business so the good people want to work here and they don't want to leave. Because you're going to have a lot of trouble finding people. And you're already having trouble finding people, whether it's an AI generated help wanted sign or a magic marker. You're already having trouble finding people. And there's no evidence that AI will solve everything, that robotics will solve everything. You're going to need human beings, and they're going to be in such short supply. And you better be ready for immigrants if they still want to come here.
Okay. All right. I want some optimism here. So coming down the home stretch of our conversation, looking ahead, and you took us both so far ahead, neither one of us are going to be around, but looking ahead, what gives you optimism that organizations can rise to this, for lack of a better term, retention challenge that you're putting out there?
Right. Become self-sufficient. Don't follow the trends. Don't look at what other companies do. Become self-sufficient. And that model is convert turnover to dollars. So you're not wasting your time on outside comparisons and doing feel-good numbers when they're not going to help you any. Convert it to dollars. Get your executive team together. Establish real retention goals, but hold managers accountable, because the number one reason employees stay or leave or engage or disengage is how much they trust their boss. Train them to do stay interviews, hold them accountable, have them forecast how long each employee will stay, build accountability reporting, just like we did at the bank. Build accountability reporting for how well you make your goals and how accurately you forecast.
Good. Hold that book up for me again. I want to see it one more time. There it is. All right. Targeting turnover, everybody. I want you to go to Amazon. I want you to look for this book. I want you to get that book. And then I want you to write a review on that book, because that really helps the author out. And people get tired of me saying it, but we authors don't get tired of hearing it. So check out that book. And when you do, put the cherry on the sundae and go ahead and write a review on it. Dick, how do people get a hold of you?
Best is by my email address. I'll tell you my email address and phone number. Call me. I don't care. Phone number is 407-694-3390.
Good.
Email address has some letters in it. Get ready. D as in Dick, Finnegan, Finnegan, at letter C as in Charles -suiteanalytics.com. So DFINNEGAN at C-SUITEANALYTICS.com.
Good. And just in case you're walking your dog out there, or you're making a hard left on the road right now, we'll have all that information up on our website as well. So we'll make, and we also have Dick's LinkedIn address on there. That's okay. In the Dick, we can put that up there for you.
Absolutely.
Good. Because that's always a good place to get the first handshake going. I met Dick about a year ago or so, and got a kick out of you then. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad we were able to have this, particularly as a corporate guy who's the one. I would have been your perfect subject matter expert, or at least subject matter person, because I was very happy at Xerox for a number of years. And it really sort of fell apart for me because of a lack of trust with a manager. I'm right in line with your numbers there, and then some. And, I remember there was a customer care video, but I used to love the line in there when people are upset like that. They don't say much. They don't do a whole lot. They just don't come back ever. And they just quietly leave. And I was a quiet leave guy. Right. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed talking to you, Dick.
Thank you, Rob. My pleasure. Hey, bye.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.